Are you a clinic manager who dreads the Monday morning phone rush? Are your walk-in patients pushy, impatient, and frustrated waiting for their turn to see the doctor? Do your patients complain about how difficult it is to phone into the clinic to make an appointment? You can do better than that, and my guest today will show you how. Welcome. My name is Jean Eaton, your practice management mentor with Information Managers, and your host for this Practice Management Nuggets webinar. In this 30 minutes webinar, Chris and Robert and I will help you to turn your waiting room into a reception area. Today, my guests are Chris Naraine, the National Sales Director with Bleen, and Robert Cove, the Solutions Consultant from Alberta. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome, Jean.
Thank you, Jean.
So tell me a little bit about Bleen, what your role is in Bleen. Chris.
As you mentioned, Jean, thank you again. I'm the National Sales Director, and we're excited to be part of this initiative, which essentially our goal is to change the color of healthcare, increase access for patients, and in a fashion that benefits everyone in the healthcare ecosystem. So we've developed a service, a free service, that benefits the clinicians, it benefits the front office staff, patients, and our communities, in that it promotes continuity of care with patient's primary care physician and keeps people out of high-cost emergency room solutions.
That sounds great. And where are you located at, Chris?
I'm based out of Toronto, but I travel across the country. In fact, just out recently in Vancouver and Calgary, but probably about 50% travel across the country. That's where the fun is, in the field, meeting clinics and helping them to address their challenges. And
Robert, you're based from Calgary yourself.
Yeah, I work out of home office in Calgary and speak to many clinics in southern Alberta, as well as some in northern Alberta. We actually have another solutions consultant, Melanie, up in the Edmonton area. So we're well covered in the province of Alberta.
So tell me some more, Robert, about the types of challenges that a clinic experiences relating to the patient flow.
Well, what I see typically, just to give you a bit of background, I've spent, prior to Bleen, close to 20 years in the healthcare industry as a representative in pharmaceuticals. So I've seen numerous clinics from around the province and around the country. And generally, what I typically see, even today, is lineups at 9 o'clock in the morning. And the lineups can be, 15, 20 people deep, waiting to get into the clinic. Sometimes the clinic physician actually is the last guy in the lineup, and he opens the doors, and in everyone rushes to the front counter to, in a walk-in environment, to try and get the next available appointment. And that's very stressful, not only for the patients that come early and stand sometimes in the cold in the wintertime, but it's also stressful for the clinic staff that have to handle that, what I'll call a bit of a deluge of humanity at the door first thing in the morning.
And if I may add to that, Jean, it's interesting to look at step back from that. In the world that we live in, efficiencies in many other areas are geared towards just in time, on time, and not having to wait. And it's interesting that 24/7, you can get online, order a pizza, get answered right away, order on Amazon products from around the world, and get confirmation in terms of delivery and so forth. And this is pervasive in many services across our communities and the way we live and work. Yet, if you need to speak to your doctor, you're restricted to using one of the oldest communication methodologies, dialing on the telephone or punching in on the telephone between the hours of 9 and 5. So there really is a disconnect there, and there's a lot of opportunity to transpose some of these communication efficiencies to really help clinics reduce the backlogs, reduce the lineups. And I'm not only talking about patient lineups, but telephone lineups, and take some of the stress and hectic reaction out of the environment, especially for the front office staff.
Jean, if I can just mention, I'll use the example of my wife. She's a teacher in Calgary, and as you can imagine, as a teacher, you're limited with the amount of time that you have available for personal use. And she was just describing to me yesterday how difficult it is for her to reach her family clinic, simply because you can be left on hold, with the amount of phone calls that are coming in, or their hours don't match her hours in terms of her availability to contact the clinic. So you can imagine the frustration. I mean, she's just an example of a teacher. You could use that in many employment areas where really we're in an age now where we should be able to do better than that.
It certainly is very frustrating from the patient side of things that they're not able to get into the phone calls and make an appointment, and then finding out what appointment time is going to work into their schedule and coordinating things can take some going forward and back. So it's not only just the one phone call, it may be the second phone call too, about needing to make some adjustments. So from the clinic side of things, that's a lot of work that comes in that takes them away from the face-to-face continuity of care from the people coming into the clinic. People don't go to a clinic to watch the receptionist spend all the time on the phone.
As frustrating as it is for the patient, I mean, let's look at the clinic staff. A patient is trying to reach the clinic. That's it's one person, one interaction. Although it may take a few tries, we know that 40% of phone calls into a family practice goes unanswered, and many of us have experienced that it takes a few tries to get through. And when you do, because it's so busy, the interaction is very, very brief. But look at the flip side. Clinic staff, they get hundreds and hundreds of calls, and they're literally on the phone trying to get that patient connected with an appointment or answering a question, and 3 or 4 other calls or a lineup of phone calls waiting to be answered, plus a lineup of people in front. So it really creates a very stressful and hectic environment. And, this is nothing new to front office medical staff. They're very aware of this. The challenge they face is they're so inundated with their environment that they have very little bandwidth to do anything else. And, what we always encourage clinic staff to consider is that some of the biggest challenges they face, the early morning rush, as you mentioned, Jean, the patient lineups and backups, and the constant phone time, there are free services available that can address those challenges that actually complement the way they work, and the consequence of which can reduce 40 to 60% of phone calls, reduce 75% of no-shows, and normalize the patient flow during the day. For example, right now staffing levels are such that they expect a patient rush in the morning, so all hands on deck for the clinic staff. And then as the patient flow tapers out during the day, they're working all of these creative schedules during the week, so everyone has full-time hours. So looking at some of these automated solutions, a big part of it is regulating patient flow so that the patients all don't show up in the morning or a certain time of the day. They're presented evenly, gradually throughout the day. And, when you've got, you're on the phone and you've got calls waiting to be answered, and you've got a wait room full of people that are not feeling well, that creates a stressful and challenging environment for all of us. It impacts front office staff, impacts the patients, and impacts the doctors too, because doctors tell us they have to spend the first 30 seconds to a minute in many instances allowing the patient to vent, for want of a better word. They've had to wait so long, or they wish they knew it would take this long because they would have had their brother drop them off. They got to pay extra parking and that kind of thing. So there are a lot of free solutions out there. I mean, Bleen is one of them, and I encourage people to investigate all of them. But there's solutions out there today that can help.
I think we've really identified one of those pink elephants in the room. Pink elephant is a problem in your organization or clinic that just never quite gets fixed. You've created a workaround or promise that you'll get to it someday, or it's a problem that everyone knows is there and everyone is trying to ignore it. So now that Robert and Chris, that we've got you on the line and you're one of our experts, tell us your number one tip for the challenged clinics that are facing issues like these regarding their patient flow. What would be your number one tip to help them with that?
The number one tip for them to be honest and articulate to themselves and others what their major pain points are. If there's one thing they could change with regards to patient flow, would be when someone comes in to say, hey, we can help you, just take some time to listen.
There are solutions out there, and doing the same thing and getting the same solution isn't change. So taking the opportunity to take a look at other options to see what can be done to improve your current situation is a great tip.
I was in a clinic in central Alberta not too long ago, and right on their front counter was a sign that said, in the last week, we have had 29 no-show appointments in our clinic, and help us not to have that many no-shows in the future by, letting us know 48 hours in advance, that sort of thing. And so I happened to be talking with the clinic manager that particular day, and I pointed out that was an area that we feel that at Bleen we can help them with. It's a frustrating area for them because it's a definite loss of revenue, as you can imagine. Unfortunately, she's only able to talk to one person at a time. In today's automated age, one of the things, as an example, that we do at Bleen is we open up the appointment availability for that clinic to their patient clientele in different formats, so that if you happen to be online, you would see that appointment is available, and it's a quick appointment within the next 2 hours in my example, and that allows the clinic a greater bandwidth, if you will, to fill that appointment rather than the old-fashioned way where it's simply one receptionist or one MOA speaking to one patient at a time.
So you're absolutely leveraging the scalability of being able to have multiple people having access to an appointment scheduler rather than waiting for that entire process of one phone call with one person.
Absolutely.
Clinics should consider what they do and look for solutions that complement what they do. And it's important to look for solutions that don't require you to reconfigure or change the efficiencies and the processes that you have. So it's essential in looking for a service like this to look for the tools to do what you're already doing more efficiently. And I think that's something that's key to Bleen's approach. Clinics ask us, well, what exactly do you do? And we tell them, well, we basically do what you do. We just give you the tools to do it more efficiently, the consequence of which is, for example, you'll reduce 40 to 60% of phone calls, reduce no-shows by 75%, turn your waiting room into a reception room because everyone is showing up just in time, on time, and just a more casual, relaxed environment for everyone. Benefits the patients, they don't have to wait. Benefits the front office staff because they don't have to deal with the crowds and the challenges that these the ebb and flow of patients coming in bunches creates, and it helps the physicians as well. Not the least of which is the patients are happy and their front office staff is happy.
Walk me through what is the process when somebody wants to explore an automated solution like Bleen to manage their patient flow. What is the setup process to doing an implementation?
Starts out, Jean, with just giving a general overview of our capabilities. We essentially do what the clinic does and addresses the clinic's challenges. We just give them the tools to do it more efficiently. So we go through a discussion where we try to understand, as it relates to patient flow, appointment scheduling, confirmation, and reminders, what are the major challenges? What are the major pain points that the front office staff faces? If there's one thing they could change, what do they need to do to grow as a clinic or just to manage their existing patient flow? And we document what their challenges are. Based on that, it's unique. It's not an out-of-the-box solution. It's customized for every clinic. We have clinics that tell us we don't have problems with the scheduled family medicine appointments. We only have problems with walk-ins. We have other clinics that say, listen, we have problems with walk-ins, but it's only on Saturdays and Sundays. That's when we have limited staff. So it really depends on specifically what is that front office's goals and challenges. And we look at that, we review it, we understand their patient load, we understand the number of doctors, we understand the schedules, and we propose automated solutions to alleviate that. And let me give you an example. I was in a clinic recently where they see about 40 walk-ins a day. When they were faced with when they show up in the morning, is they've got approximately 30 or 40 patients calling in at the same time and or showing up at the same time. So imagine if those 40 patients were made aware that they could book same-day appointments after midnight for the same day. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, patient is sick, she calls in, and she finds out that there's an appointment at 9 o'clock. Next patient calls in, et cetera, 9:05, 9:10, what have you. Now, the 40th patient doesn't call in until 6 o'clock, and he finds out that the first available appointment is not till 11:30. Well, guess what? He can stay in bed and show up for his 11:30 appointment 15 minutes before. And all of this happens without the front office staff having to be on the phone or processing bunches of patients showing up at the same time. So it's really a simple way and a powerful way to satisfy a lot of needs, front office staff needs, patient needs.
That's interesting. So you could actually target part of your client or your patient population. So you can target just the walk-in and same-day appointments and manage your annual appointments and your chronic care patients in the fashion that you're doing now.
It's universal. So you use as little or as much of it as makes sense to you. And again, the service is only limited by the ability of the clinic to articulate their specific needs. If they can articulate their challenges and their needs, for the large part, we can figure solutions for it. So, walk-ins is a usual starting point, or same-day appointments, because that creates the most chaos in the environment. But there's also family medicine, the regular scheduled appointments. Those fall into the service as well. For that category, patients get, Bob talked about reducing 75% of no-shows. Well, the reason that happens, most people are decent, and the reason they don't show up is because they genuinely forget or they're poor planners. So we mitigate that with a reminder regimen. For example, for the family medicine appointments, they'll get a 2-week reminder, they'll get a 2-day reminder, and they'll get a 2-hour reminder. And on the 2-day reminder, the 48-hour reminder, you let them know that this is your last opportunity to reschedule this appointment. If you don't show up for your scheduled appointment, you're taking a spot from someone that needs it. And any additional messaging that the clinic may want to convey at that time. There's also the wait room solution, and we found in some areas, very large clinics, there can be a lot of tension in the front office that pulls in the staff. For example, you've got someone on a walk-in appointment that's been waiting an hour, someone else walks in, they wait 10 minutes and they go in. Former individual doesn't recognize that they're a walk-in, and this individual has booked this appointment a couple months ago. So the wait room management solution has a next up alert system that allows patients to see when their turn is coming, and also allows them to distinguish that this other patient is seeing a different doctor.
Sure, that can help to circumvent a lot of tension about whether or not you're the next person in line, and helps to make the whole process through a little smoother.
Absolutely. We communicate to them based on how the patients want to be communicated. Telephone, text, or email, and it's increasingly text.
Okay, so Bleen has the technology that they can contact the patient in the communication method that the patient has identified that they want to be contacted. And then you do push messaging based on the criteria that the clinic sets.
Exactly. We're providing communication vehicles, and the clinic determines how, if, and to what extent they want to use it.
So tell me what Bleen is then. It's a messaging system that is independent of your EMR. It's how does the clinic staff access it? How do they make the buttons work?
A good question. So Bleen is a cloud-based automated scheduling solution that works alongside the EMR. It allows patients to see 24/7 whether the clinic is open or closed, those appointment slots that the clinic has carved out to be visible. And it could be 100% of their schedule. It could be only the walk-ins and not the family medicine. It could be any slice and dice of that. But the intent is, based on a clinic's appointment booking rules, they make available time slots for patients to be able to register over the phone, 24/7 automated, online, obviously 24/7. And if they, like my mother, they still want to call into the clinic, they have that option too. Canada Health InfoWay, incidentally, they do a number of studies on this, and they say 90% of Canadians would like to have automated options to contact their family practice. So there's a lot of uptake on this. Again, you only get the uptake if the patients are aware. So capability doesn't equal utility, and none of this will work unless you've got someone who's going to tell your 10,000 patients that these options are available.
So if I'm a patient and I go to the clinic and I register with the clinic, so I'm now attached to that patient or to that clinic, and the clinic tells me that I now have an option to schedule my appointments through the cloud-based service. So they give me a card that gives me a link that I can go and register myself for the next appointment?
Exactly. The benefit to the clinic in terms of the reduction in phone calls and no-shows, if a new patient comes in, obviously we provide in clinic literature and cards so they know for the next time. But the uptake on that is slow. I mean, how often does a patient go to a clinic? So the real key in terms of seeing immediate benefit is to not catch the patients after they've come in for the next time, which we do, but it's catch the ones that are about to come in over the next few weeks. And that's where the upfront notifying all of your patients that this option and this service is available is so powerful.
You've made the decision that you want to go with Bleen for the automated scheduling, and you can notify all of your patients at once that are currently registered with you that you've got this new service and it's available for you to use.
Exactly. And because it's universal, it's entirely up to them whether they want to use the service or they want to contact the clinic the same way they've always done. Our experience, and validated by studies I just mentioned, Canada Health InfoWay, is there's a huge uptake in the automated approach.
So one of the things that, of course, that we have to be aware of in the healthcare industry is the privacy and confidentiality of the patient's information. How does Bleen address the privacy and confidentiality concerns?
Excellent question. Comply with all of the provincial requirements for privacy. And Alberta actually has the highest spec in the land. In fact, to the best of our knowledge, they have the highest privacy spec in healthcare for all of North America. And what we've done is we've engaged a consultant out of Edmonton that has worked with the college, worked with the government, and has registered many of the PIA clinics in the province. So that's very effectively addressed with the highest authority that we could find in Alberta. We can certainly guide clinics to further detail on that, and we go up to and including providing the filled-in documentation for them to submit.
Okay, so that's great that you're helping the clinics meet their privacy impact assessment requirements. The data that Bleen has, does Bleen then actually have a database of my clinic's patients' records?
Absolutely not. We don't. There's a brick wall between our service and the EMR. We don't connect with the EMR, and the only information that we have is the patient name and the health card number. That allows the service to do two things. Number one, verify that they're an existing patient of the clinic, which is what our service is for, existing patients of the clinic. And secondly, it allows us and the clinic to match up that patient with their principal doctor, if that's what they want to do. So in a clinic with 10 doctors, I'm only allowed to see the available appointments for my doctor and not the 3 or 4 other doctors, unless the clinic wants to configure it otherwise. So we have just a rudimentary identification to allow people to use the service. And again, this is all covered under our PIA compliance.
So obviously the data service for Bleen are in Canada.
Yes, we're a Canadian company. Our headquarters are out east.
So we've addressed the PIA requirement. What are the benefits to the patients when their clinic starts using Bleen as an automated solution for scheduling?
Well, I think, Jean, Bleen just simply frees up an awful lot of time where, the MOA is freed from the phone If their reduction in phone calls over time drops down 40%, then perhaps they have 60% time to make more effective use, whether it be the EMR systems within the clinic, whether it be billing, whatever the nature of the clinic's desire for the use of that MOA's time. And the stress level goes way, way down, especially as Chris pointed out, in the peak periods of time in the clinic.
And for the patients, right now, you call up your family clinic. If you want to schedule an appointment, 40% of those calls aren't answered. So it can involve multiple calls. If it's a same-day episodic event and you need to see your doctor today, what are the options? The options are jump on the phone with 30 other people at 9 o'clock and call in, or go line up with 30 other people for an appointment that may happen an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours from now. So it's a tremendous time savings for patients. First time, first try, they get an appointment. They don't have to wait. They don't have to call back.
We've got lots of advantages. The patients get access to the appointment scheduler. The clinic staff are not spending as much time on the phone. The patients are getting a response the first time that they are connecting to the clinic to get their questions answered and getting that appointment. You're making the process smoother inside the clinic when everybody is there. You've got the next up alerts on the TV or the LCD monitor to let people know who is next. So we're really changing the waiting room to a reception room. That's fantastic.
Exactly. And, before we talk about that, Jean, I should mention that a big part of what we want to encourage is continuity of care with your existing physician or your existing clinic. And, one of the first ways you want to, for patient retention, one of the first things that you want to do is make it easy for your patients to deal with you. So you take the incentive away from them for looking at other options. You call the clinic, you can't get through. There's a lineup. There's a dynamic called walkouts, where in a walk-in environment, patients have been waiting in a busy clinic for a couple hours, and they figure, nobody's going to notice. I'm just going to leave. I'm going to go to another clinic. So patient retention and continuity of care, it helps the patient. It helps the physicians manage them, and it reinforces an efficient healthcare system. As it relates to the reception room, again, if you show up for your appointment 15 minutes before, you're not waiting with 20, 30 other people that are sick. It takes a lot of the anxiety and stress out of the environment. The waiting room becomes really a processing area, and we call it a reception area, which we hope conveys the difference in the pre-Bleen environment versus the post-Bleen environment. And of course, on the monitor, there's interesting content for patients as well. The clinic can also use the front office monitor for their own messaging. All of those things you see stuck up on the wall. If you need a doctor's note, you've got to do this. All of those little things you see stuck on the window and the walls, they can put that up on slides on the front office monitor.
I was just going to say, Gene, often as a solution consultant going into the clinics, quite often I'll hear, I've never heard of Bleen. Is this new? Well, it's new to Alberta. The product was launched in the rest of Canada January of this year. It's actually been in process for over 5 years in the province of Quebec. We have a lab in Laval, Quebec. It's a fully operational 21-doctor clinic that Bleen does all of its validation, product testing before any of the ideas are pushed forth out to other Bleen clinics. So today, with the rest of Canada coming on board, we're well in excess of 300 clinics, which is huge in Canada. And there's over 2,000 family physicians currently using the system, and over 2.4 million appointments are managed annually through our service.
That's great. Having that testimonial and having that practice in place, and those numbers of satisfied clients and patients, and the number of transactions that's going through the system is very exciting.
It is, Jean, and one of the things that is noticeable to me as a former pharma rep is there's a number of new clinics coming on stream in Calgary and Edmonton in particular. And a lot of these clinics are smaller clinics, and they are looking for new patients and what have you to get started. And one of the wonderful things that happens through a company like Bleen is the ability to see the power of association, if you will. So becoming part of a Bleen network of clinics, if you went on the web, you probably know this better than I. Search engines are based on the number of hits that there are on a particular name. Well, you can imagine if you have over 2.4 million appointments managed annually by Bleen, if you are now a Bleen clinic, let's say, as opposed to Robert's Family Healthcare Clinic, the chances of you finding a Bleen clinic when you search are much, much greater. And so that really helps a young upstart clinic attract patients to them.
That's another benefit to be able to help a new clinic getting started. For a clinic that has been listening to our webinar today, and they say, I want to take a look at Bleen. How does that work? Who do I contact? And what are the fees and associated charges for a clinic getting started?
The easiest way to contact us, Jean, is to go on Bleen, BLEEN.ca or .com, and there's a contact form there. It's probably the most efficient way. And we have representatives in all provinces. I shouldn't say all provinces. Most provinces across the country. We've got representation, a few reps in BC, a few in Alberta, Manitoba, and Ontario, and we're expanding to the other provinces, Atlantic Canada, over the next few months. So yeah, go on Bleen.ca and submit a request. To the second part of your question, what are the associated fees? Product is not free, but it is free to the clinic. So there's no charge to the clinic for the services we just described. It probably is material for another discussion, but our business model is based on generating revenue not from the clinic, but from other parties. And we're happy to discuss that individually with clinics as we engage them. But it's important to emphasize, as I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, that the service is free to the clinic.
Now, if I was a new clinic getting started and I contacted Bleen today about how I can make this work for my clinic, about how long would be a typical implementation stage to automate the patient flow?
Typically takes about 4 weeks.
Okay.
It can be done in about 2. So I'll give you a good example. We may walk into a clinic and the MOAs or the office manager is very interested. He or she may not be able to meet with us for another week or so. So that's 1 week down the road. We meet and the office manager agrees this is something they could really benefit their environment. So the next step would be to have them speak with our technical team. They go through a process where they distill the essence of that clinic's business rules. Once we have that information, all of the nuances of the clinic's business rules related to appointment scheduling, confirmations, and reminders, it probably takes us about 2 weeks to program or code that. So, cut a long story short, 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay. That's entirely reasonable and gives the clinic the opportunity to identify how they want to use Bleen, really get crystal down about what their appointment rules are, and to be able to train their staff and make sure that they've got the right policies, procedures, and the communications to the patients so that they can have a smooth implementation to be able to automate those practices.
We do the training. To be honest, the training is not very complicated. I mean, it's a scheduler, but we do the training and we make sure that everybody is comfortable, and we've got 24/7 support.
Well, gentlemen, it has been really interesting to talk with you about having these automated solutions that complement your workflow so that you can be more efficient in your practice, so that your patients aren't facing the bottleneck from having the phone lines, that your staff are more freed up so that they can provide a more value-added service to the patients and being able to see the whites of the eyes of the patients and providing a service that's required there. For a clinic to be able to reduce the amount of no-shows is a tremendous advantage. And this is an implementation process that is independent of your EMR. You could still be running a paper office, and Bleen automated patient flow services will help you to increase those efficiencies in your clinic. Chris and Bob, thank you very much for joining us today and telling us about the advantages of Bleen.
Thanks very much, Gene.
Thanks, Gene, and thanks to your audience for allowing us to have this time with them.
All right, thank you. So if you're interested in finding out more about Bleen and how it can work with your clinic practice, contact Bleen at Bleen, BLEEN.ca, and fill out the contact form on that website. This is Jean Eaton, your Practice Management Nugget webinar host, and until we talk next time, we'll see you then.